All right, hello, I'm Steve Muzzy, Senior Manager of Climate Programs at Second Nature. Welcome to today's webinar, the Solutions Center, helping you understand your carbon reduction options. Next slide, Dave. So before we get into it, just wanted to quickly share a very recent and our upcoming webinars. So last week, we had a webinar on a aggregated collective purchase by a group of colleges in Pennsylvania, and this is linked to that recording. And then on Thursday, we have another webinar that will talk about a solar project on site in Minnesota that also talks about how the development of that project was integrated into the educational experience of the campus and the community. And then there's a link there to all of our recorded webinars that you can access. Next slide. So just quick housekeeping for today's presentation. So again, this is recorded and will be sent to all participants as soon as it's done. And then we will take that and post it on our website to be available to anyone that's interested. And for those that are participating on today's call, please just use the GoToWebinar control panel and the question function to write your question in, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. And I think we're all getting pretty used to the online communications platforms, but everyone's on mute and you will be forced to listen to me and my fellow presenters. Next slide. So joining me today are Dave Karlsgodt, the Director of Energy and Utility Advisory Services at Brailsford and Dunlavey, and Chris O'Brien, Director of Business Development at CustomerFirst Renewables. So both Dave and Chris and their companies are great supporters of Second Nature and the climate leadership commitments. And today they are going to share the why and how they came up with the idea for the Solutions Center. And they're also going to share the process they undertook to develop it to the web-based format that we're going to share with all of you today. I will then follow them with kind of a brief overview of how to engage with the Solutions Center to continue with the build out of content and sharing of experience and knowledge to accelerate decarbonization on your campuses. So next slide. So then just a quick thank you and recognition of Dave and Chris's companies, Brailsford and Dunlavey, and CustomerFirst Renewables for their sponsorship to Second Nature. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave to get us started.
Hello, everyone. Nice to be with you all today. Just going to give a little bit of background. First of all, my name is Dave Karlsgodt, as Steve just mentioned. We have been thinking about this project for a couple of years and working on it in one way, shape, or form for a long time. The way that this project started was my business partner, Rob, and I had been working with climate action planning efforts at various campuses, and we were a little bit frustrated that we felt like every time we started a new project, we had to start from scratch. So we started thinking about, are there ways that we can prep people with materials about common solutions, because we ended up basically providing the same set of solutions every time, or in some way, shape, or form. So the other thing that was frustrating is a lot of the things that we would end up talking a lot about, because we were starting from scratch every time, was that things that weren't, in the end, didn't end up adding up to very much impact for carbon mitigation efforts. Another comment we always would get is, what are other campuses doing? So we figured, rather than starting from scratch every time and focusing on things that didn't have impact, how could we bring forward things that other campuses were doing? And so we came up with this idea of what we were calling the Solutions Library. This is a project my business partner Rob and I worked on kind of off and on. We had some interns working on it for a while. We created some graphics. I showed it to maybe some of you that are on this call today in various ways, shapes, or forms. But it basically lived in kind of a side project in our company for a long time, until Chris reached out to me one time when we were having a conversation, and he pitched a kind of similar idea to me, and I started showing him some of these graphics, and then he kind of encouraged me to keep going. Eventually, we took that idea, pressure tested it with some campuses. I hope some of them are on the phone today. That was last summer. And then we brought the idea to Second Nature, and they were really interested in taking this forward. So we approached Second Nature with this idea mainly because we saw them as a trusted third party, because if one of our firms were to put this out, it would be kind of maybe seen with a scant eye towards us promoting our own best interest. But that really was not the intention. The intention was, how do we make all of this work go faster and not spend times on things that we can work through quickly. So what we've conceived of is an open source collaboration. I'll talk a little bit more about the open source aspect of it towards the end of the presentation. And so far, we've worked with, I think it was January 2nd, I got an email from Tim Carter that said, all right, David, we like that idea. We're going forward with it. Let's have something to launch at the summit. So we've been kind of scrambling to get something up. What had been live up until this last week was what we were calling our minimum viable product, which was, there was a site that was launched. It was a basic concept, but we've since, based on some input from various folks and just kind of review and getting the idea out to some more people, we've made some additional changes that we'll walk through today. So as Chris and I really started to sit down and think about what was it that we were trying to do, we knew that there's lots and lots of different efforts, around the world, around higher ed, around other firms that are trying to solve similar problems. So we wanted to make sure what we were doing had, kind of a unique value to offer. So the way that we framed the problem, in 3 basic points was, there are hundreds of campuses that are making these commitments to lower their carbon emissions, but generally speaking, progress has been slow. I know a few more have announced carbon neutrality, but there's still plenty of campuses that have made commitments and have actually increased their emissions, not decreased. So how can we help accelerate that? The second part of the problem was, really, we saw there being these major hurdles to addressing things at scale. Like I said, there's lots and lots of time that was spent on kind of small solutions or things that didn't really add up to much impact, but they were taking all the oxygen out of the room. And then the third major item was, we found this really around things that were cutting edge or things that were major changes to business as usual were the things that people had the most challenges around. So this really is more making a business case for these solutions. So that was something we wanted to address. Some of the just general issues that we knew were getting in the way, and I won't read all of these, but I mean, it wasn't just a lack of information. I mean, there's political issues, there's reputational risk that people are dealing with. But I think the one that I'd like to highlight here more than anything is this inability to think at scale. And so a lot of what the Solution Center is trying to focus on solutions that will help us scale up our efforts quickly. So just to define what we laid out as kind of the fundamental elements of what this was and what it wasn't, we knew that we wanted to be web-based and visually focused, so that it was mostly about graphics and people being able to understand things quickly. We wanted it to be curated content, so we didn't want this just to be another message board where people could throw any idea at all, but we really wanted to focus it on things that you could take and help make a business case right away. Really about making a business case and de-risking those ideas and really focusing in on the carbon impact. There's lots of sustainability efforts that don't have anything to do with carbon, and they are great, but that's not what this is. This really has to do with reducing carbon emissions. We want it to be based on real deployments, and tell those stories and move people quickly past those one-on-one level conversations, so that we could get people into actually deploying solutions. And then finally, as I mentioned earlier, we knew that we needed a Second Nature or another organization like it to be able to have credibility to this, as well as to help curate other interested parties for helping us collaborate on this. What we've started today is just a starting point, and we're going to encourage all of you to get involved. And then I guess one other point, what it was versus what it wasn't, and we didn't want to focus on bleeding edge R&D. So this is not about modular nuclear plants or flex capacitors. This is about things that actually exist today. And while things like social justice and equity and are super important, that's not the focus of the Solution Center. There may be elements of that in some of the solutions directly, but the focus was really on carbon mitigation, and that's the frame or lens through which we're seeing the solutions. It's also not climate science. I mean, we believe in climate science and support the climate science, but the Solution Center is not trying to debate that or promote that or anything about it. It's really about the specific solutions themselves. And we're also not trying to focus on things that don't relate to campuses. So we want this to be unique to higher ed, a place for you and your campuses to come for information. So what is it? Let's take a look at it real quick, and we'll go out here in a second. But basically, if you want to go on your own browser, you're welcome to right now. It's this just secondnature.org/solution center with the hyphen in between. You'll notice when you get there, there are a couple of different ways to navigate. So first, you'll get to what we call a grid view, which will give you graphics, and you can search using some different search techniques, and we'll dig into those here in just a second. There's also a tabular view, so if you want to sort and slice and dice the way that we've rated the different solutions, you can do that as well. Just a highlight of some of the solutions that we have, as well as ones that we're planning to release soon. There are approximately, I think we're up to about 42 solutions that we've identified, and we encourage if you have input on other solutions that you see that we haven't represented yet. And then one key element here would be this idea of an infographic. So every solution that we've identified has a visually focused graphic to go with it. So the idea is, can we describe the idea of the solution in as few words as possible? In some cases, we can do it with virtually no words, and in other cases, there are a handful of words just to help identify what a solution is talking about. So each solution in the website has a combination of things. So you have the infographic I just mentioned. You'll have the title, an icon. So it's basically a icon version of the infographic to try to represent that idea. It's got a basic description, more or less a paragraph to describe what the concept is, a couple of key benefits and challenges that are likely to you're going to run into if you try to pursue this solution. And then we have what we're calling the impact matrix, and I'm going to let Chris dig into this here in a second, which helps you identify different impacts it can have, both on how big of a carbon impact it is, the economics, and some other elements. It also has a section for resources. So we understand that this Solution Center is just a gateway to much deeper resources on any one of these topics. So for example, here in this carbon offsets program, we're linking to a lot of resources and also an expert, in this case, Ruby Woodside from Second Nature, who's leading efforts on carbon offsets for Second Nature. So Chris, I'm going to turn over to you and let you introduce yourself and maybe talk about the matrix for a second.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I love getting to talk about the matrix. Seems like we're all kind of living in the matrix right now. Yeah, so my name is Chris O'Brien. I'm with CustomerFirst Renewables, and as Dave said, I came to the concept of this solution center with a lot of similar thoughts that Dave outlined on that first slide, those first couple of slides. My own background, speaking of background, hopefully you can't hear that airplane flying right by my window at this moment. My own background is working on campus myself as a sustainability director, and so I've experienced a lot of the problems that we're trying to address in this center. I've experienced them firsthand. So, you know, a lot of the thinking behind this reflects real problems that I experienced myself, and so I'll just talk through some of those, and I'll talk through how that resulted in what you're seeing on this page, this impacts matrix. I spent 5.5 or so years in charge of the sustainability program at American University, and we started it from scratch, so there wasn't a lot of, no one was telling me what to do, and we didn't have any grand plan. So as I've learned that many of my colleagues around the country, opportunistic, right? A lot of sustainability professionals are actually kind of entrepreneurial there, or intrapreneurial, you know, kind of creating a new organization within an institution. And sometimes a way to make impact is to just kind of knock on every door, and if one opens, then go inside and see what you can get done. But that wasn't a very strategic approach. And so I found myself, as Dave was mentioning earlier, a lot of times spending a lot of time on projects that just didn't have a lot of impact. They could have real outcomes, and there was actual impact, but in terms of scale, it wasn't getting there. And so, you know, when you look at this impacts matrix here on the screen, this is a result of us trying to come up with, how do you come up with a quantifiable approach to, you know, systematically trying to prioritize actions that will cause significant impact in terms of mitigating your greenhouse gas emissions. And so we came up with these three metrics. You know, first, I'll just go left to right here. The first one is kind of obvious. How much, what is the potential for reducing greenhouse gases? Small, medium, large, enormous, etc. Is it going to cost you money or save you money? A lot or a little? How hard is it to accomplish it? Is this something that is widely done and very easy to do, or is it something that's going to have a degree of difficulty? And so you can see on this dial, we actually, you know, move that needle based on you know, our assessment of the degree of difficulty. Time to implement, this is another significant factor, right? Because some things take years to implement and have very little impact. Other things might take less time to implement and have bigger impact. So you want to weigh those against each other. The fifth one there is maintenance. You know, is this something that's going to need constant supervision and maybe more dollars over time, more staff time over time, or is it kind of a set it and forget it? And then the sixth metric there is publicity impact. Is this something that is going to enhance the reputation of the institution, or is it something that's just kind of ho-hum, might not even register in terms of public visibility, might have impact, but might not draw the attention of students, faculty, staff, or the broader university community. So the example that you're seeing here is the real impacts on the utility scale wind and solar topic in the Solution Center. And so we thought, we started with this. This was actually the first topic that we populated in the center, because we thought it was a good example of using the impacts matrix to get a sense of something that has a high impact, has a potential for net save, and has a strong business case. Essentially, I would kind of, you know, quantify all of the five metrics on the right as collectively the business case. You know, it's going to save you potentially a significant amount of money. There is a degree of difficulty and it takes some time, but the impact is enormous, and it has the potential to draw a lot of positive publicity. Dave, do you want to hit next? I think there's a drill down on this in the next slide, right?
Yep. Sir, is it updating?
Yeah, thanks. So what you'll see, going back to Dave's point about curating the site, you know, we're not trying to be exhaustive here. I think part of the problem we're trying to solve is that there's so many things that you can do to try to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions that it's easy to get lost in the weeds and have a hard time, you know, hard time seeing the forest for the trees. Maybe an apropos metaphor there. So we have the amount of content here is very targeted. So you can click on each one of these impacts. You only see about a paragraph or so of description of each of these impacts to give you the very high level assessment of the relevance of that impact. And again, going back to Dave's earlier point, part of our hope here is that this will serve as a high level source of educational content for campus sustainability stakeholders to bring to their key decision makers and help get their key decision makers informed at a high level, not lost in the weeds, not sunk in data or experimental research, but rather is there a there, and how can we quickly, kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and figure out which topics are ones that are appropriate for our university and are going to have a big impact, and reflect the pros and cons that we prioritized. So this is just a screenshot of clicking down on the more info button on each of these impacts. I think it goes back to you now, Dave.
Great. Well, I guess the other element that we wanted to think through was who would actually use this. Is this intended to educate sustainability professionals, or is this a tool for the sustainability professionals to use themselves, or somewhere in between? And I think one of the use cases we came up with is, say, if you are a sustainability professional and you're drafting a climate action plan or trying to promote a particular solution and making the business case for it, you would use this center as a source for material, as a reference guide, as an easy way to forward on to other stakeholders that you wanted to educate on the topic. And actually the graphics themselves, and I'll talk about that here in a second. Another one would be, or I guess this is sort of along the lines of what I just said, with if you're a facilities professional and you're actually trying to get a particular funding for a program or a project, you might use this as a source. Maybe you have a great case study and you want to share it with the world. We're hoping this can be more of a clearinghouse for carbon mitigation projects that have been successful, to help build the general business case for other campuses as well as give you the ability to have a place to put your great story. We know that campuses promote things on their own websites, and that's great, but is there a way that they can be shared in such a way that they're designed to be replicated elsewhere? And it doesn't mean that you can't link back to your own case study and your own site. And then there's people like us, industry professionals. If we know a lot about a particular solution, I know Chris and I both spend a lot of time kind of re-explaining the same things over and over. And it's in our interest to have the people that we're working with better understand the solutions that we're talking about. So I've alluded to a couple of times this idea of an open source system. And while this isn't fully deployed yet, literally, I think we need to make some tweaks to the template and get some final approval through Second Nature. But the intent of this site is that it's going to be released under a Creative Commons license. So in other words, if you want to use the graphics in the site, you can. The only thing you need to do is to make a simple attribution of where you got it. This also means you could take it, you could manipulate it, make a derivative work of it as well, as long as you also share that with the world. So the intent is for it to be freely shareable with others, and that we can, if you create something, we can get it back into the solutions or library or the solution center for others to use and share. So we're not all just recreating the same thing over and over again. So Steve, I think you're up.
Okay, just real quick, were we gonna actually do a live demo?
Yeah, certainly, we can do that.
You want to do that first, or do you want me to do that?
I can take you through it. So again, if you go to the Second Nature website, although I'll start there, you'll see it's actually right here on the homepage right now. That'll take you to this homepage here. And this, as of right now, we're still filling out more topics, but you'll see some samples here. We've got, I think, 9 or 10 currently live, and we're going to be expanding more as we move forward. You can view this 2 different ways. You have the grid or the table view, as I mentioned in the previous demo. The table itself is sortable. So if you want to look at things like, say, I'm really interested in short paybacks or short timelines, I can do that. If you want things that are low maintenance, or you don't mind about that, that's one way. You want things that are going to be important for publicity, you can sort it that way. You can click into any one of these solutions, and that'll take you to the full page. So again, these include the infographic, the description, the benefits, the challenges, the impact matrix in more detail. Each of these has more details that you can dig into. You can show them all or show one at a time. We've got these resources, and then we have these experts. So if you want to talk to Chris O'Brien about large-scale renewable energy, you can click here. And what this will eventually, what it will do is essentially allow you to fill out a form, which will go through Second Nature and then connect you with Chris. And this could be, you could also talk to, to a campus expert as well, in case you didn't want to talk to Chris directly, and talk to one of your campus colleagues that has done this work. All right, what else do you want to show us, Steve?
No, that's great. Just wanted to do a live demo of the all the still images we walked through. Sure. All right, so great. Thank you, Dave and Chris. Again, they presented this idea, the Second Nature. We're very excited about it, and I myself in particular am very excited because I like the idea of the generating of content that's campus centric and is being refreshed or freshened up as we move through this year and hopefully beyond. So how can you get involved currently with the development of content? So there are kind of three indications on the visual images on the topics when you're in the Solution Center. So utility scale wind and solar, as an example, is ready to use. So you're interested in the topic and presenting that topic as an option for your institution to undertake. You go for it, you go in there. And it's also available for campuses that may have already executed a project and would like to share their outcome and want to be listed as an example, and perhaps maybe even a campus expert as another option to be able to connect with your peers. I think what's really unique too about the Solution Center is it's not just about sharing the great work and outcome of a project, but also sharing the process. We want to know and be able to share what it was like to work with a service provider, who were the key stakeholders in that process to execute that project. So that's an opportunity available to folks right now. Now we have two other levels of demonstrating where a certain topic is at, and we're going to focus on the far right here, the Seeking Expert banner. So right now, if you see that, and this is going to be populated more in the next week or two with other topic areas, but we're seeking experts. So service for-profit industry providers or NGOs or campus experts. So if you see that tag, you click into that topic, you'll have a contact. If you're a campus expert, you want to get involved, you'll contact me. Or if you're a company, for-profit or an NGO, you will contact Second Nature's Director of Strategic Partnerships, Eric Howard, and we'll have a conversation about what that looks like to get involved. And then finally, pretty straightforward, but if you see the coming soon, that means the topic has been spoken for by a for-profit, NGO, or campus expert. Content is under development, and it's going to be available soon for folks to utilize. Next slide, Dave. Just showing a still, and we could actually bounce back into the live demo, but basically this is a Seeking an Expert. Again, we have the graphic is available, and then just the links to contact us to learn about how to get involved. And
do you want me to go to that one, Steve?
Sure, I'll just keep talking. So just kind of sharing, so the climate leadership commitments and Second Nature do have corporate sponsorship, and so the Solution Center is seen as a menu option of how to get involved, to engage as a sponsor. So again, if you're an expert service provider, this would be a way to put your stamp on it. You would get this for a certain amount of time. You would be able to develop the content, and again, balancing the the experience you have working with a campus. Ideally, this would not just be, we'll try to balance with you if you have existing marketing materials that demonstrate very clearly the product or service you're providing, but ideally we really want it to be campus centric and be able to tell that story for our community. So I think that's, did I miss anything, guys, on how to get involved? As Dave and Chris have said, this has been, through a few iterations already in the web-based format, working with our web developer and our graphic designer to keep this fresh and new, and we're always finding new tweaks. So we're also inviting that feedback too from people, from folks that want to, if you're in there and you see some things, you have some questions or some ideas for us, please share.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think just to reiterate Steve's point, I don't think I really mentioned that up front, is, Chris and I realized that while we are for-profit companies or represent for-profit companies, we intended this to be something that promotes the ideas or the core ideas and the pure business cases, not as a just a guise for a commercial. And so I think I want to reiterate that. I think the goal would be to fit the standard or the design standard and the kind of the flow of the site, and using that format to help make sure it is something that campuses can find useful, and that it doesn't feel like you're using somebody else's commercial material. And then back to the idea of the Creative Commons licensing, that it really is intended to be shared to promote it with the world, not as just a single use case to promote. Even a campus, I know campuses often will promote their own brand, and that's not really what this is about. So do we have questions? I guess Devin, or I'm not sure if, or should we just open it up to questions?
We do have a few questions in the chat, and then if folks want to add questions, now's the time. Folks are commenting that this reminds them of the Project Drawdown list of solutions, how ASHI is representing things, and then IEN's resource hub through GRITS. Is there any plan to work with these groups or sort of share some of this information with some of these groups?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it drew inspiration from Drawdown. I will say that we started the project before Drawdown really became a thing. So, but when I read that, I was like, oh yeah, this is exactly what we're doing. I would say the big difference with this and Drawdown is this is campus specific. So you can think of it as a campus specific version of Drawdown. My understanding of how it would vary from GRITS is GRITS really is focused on, and maybe Chris, you can correct me if you know better. My understanding is GRITS is really more focused on a specific project deployment and the economics around that particular project deployment, which I think is very useful for people in facilities. This is really more about kind of a big picture idea and building the business case for it generally. So I could see the two kind of dovetailing quite nicely. This is really more of an entry point on those things and less about, I think I don't know, Chris, I don't know if you want to correct me on that.
No, I think you hit it, Dave. In terms of the relation to Drawdown, I think of it the same way, that this is a university-centric version of Drawdown, right? We're not talking about where Drawdown is talking about global system solutions. We're talking about campus level solutions, otherwise very similar. And in terms of GRITS, I think looking at the Solution Center, especially to me as a former practitioner, if I had the Solution Center, the screen where Dave did the table view of topic types with the 6 impacts listed across in columns, and you could sort by different types of impacts, that would have been incredibly helpful to me during my climate action planning process to figure out which types of projects were going to have the right kinds of impacts for our campus. Then once I select some, I might turn to GRITS and use GRITS as a very technical tool for implementing a particular project. The solutions library is not going to get you to implementation. It's going to help you prioritize at a very high level.
Yeah, what was the other one, Devin, you mentioned? I didn't catch the third one.
Yeah, it was IEN, Project Drawdown, and ASHE.
Well, and I think the other thing with, I guess the difference with ASHE, and I think this is generally true with Second Nature and ASHE, is I would consider ASHE being more focused on specifically solutions for sustainability professionals and the learning for them. This really would be, I guess it's similar in that sense, but it's really more intended to be a tool for sustainability professionals to help make that business case to others. So it may be a little more focused on, I mean, ultimately your CFO or your committee or whoever you're trying to talk to. But certainly as much collaboration between all those organizations would be welcome, and that's why we want it to be open source.
Yeah, there's overlap there. I just want to also add with SEI, Sustainable Endowment Institute, and their GRITS tool. So they are going through an update, software update, and development of additional functionality. We partner, Second Nature, climate leadership commitment signatories get free access to the tool. And so, yes, definitely overlap. And as Chris stated, this is a higher level overview, but GRITS is terrific because it does dig down to those individual kind of building level or, building level projects, basically. So I think it'll be a great source of inspiration where topic areas and decarbonization projects can be shared.
Another question coming in would be what would be a demonstration of a campus expert for a strategy, and would local companies be prioritized as experts based on where they are?
Good question. I guess I don't think we've really considered that question yet, but so I think this is a little bit, we're still figuring it out. I think at this point, to be a campus expert, you just have to have demonstrated that you've accomplished the thing that we're talking about. Obviously, you can't be a campus expert on energy storage if you don't have an energy storage project to speak to. But I guess, Steve, maybe, I don't know if you've thought more about that. What would get somebody past? I mean, they pretty much have to call you, have a conversation, and not sound like they're crazy, right? Is that about the bar at this point, or do we have a higher bar?
No, exactly. I mean, we would start with a conversation. It would be, vetting talking to each other, trying to figure out if it's a good match and there's alignment and it makes sense. Again, we're looking to support and provide and share, carbon reduction solutions. So.
And then as far as
oh, go ahead. If the bar is not sounding crazy, I'm not sure you and I passed that, Dave.
That's true. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you guys got through this.
Maybe you have to be a little bit crazy.
The question is a good one about local businesses.
Yeah.
I think that's something we should take back and think about. I think probably for the topics that are populated in the center right now, I don't think we've seen a topic where proximity, geographic proximity was an issue. So it just I don't think it's hit our radar yet to think about that as a lens. But as we hit topics that might have a uniquely local angle to the solution, it's a good idea to think about, if that's an avenue for specifically, very intentionally trying to reach out and engage with local businesses.
The other thing too is I think we've conceived of the idea there could be multiple experts, certainly multiple campus experts and even multiple for-profit experts. There may be some limitations around, I mean, there is some aspect of funding this project and producing this by giving people sponsorship opportunities. So there's kind of the balance of that. But we have talked about the idea of there are certain topics I know my firm would be really interested in sponsoring, but there are other firms that would be great collaborators with us that wouldn't really be competitors. So yeah, it's still to be determined, but if you've got some suggestions, that's a great question. I hadn't really thought about that yet. Devin, any more?
Have there been thoughts on how to engage university students and use some of their information or research to inform some solutions?
Let's see. If there is, there's research, or I guess that the idea of this would be, since we're focusing it on things that have been deployed at scale, is sort of so it may lean against that generally. That said, I could definitely see students getting involved in helping to produce the original content or to kind of help flesh these things out. In fact, a lot of the work that we did to build this in the first place and to kind of conceive of the ideas and the initial research we did was based on student interns that we hired. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but there's the curation aspect of it, which kind of does lead to more professional or experienced people to be involved, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, like, we wouldn't want a lot of student projects in here, but that said, I don't think it precludes students from getting involved. What do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. There's no bias against student, a student element to this. Students aren't. I would say that students are not necessarily the primary audience, but on a project by project or topic by topic basis, where there was student involvement in a given case study, it would appear there. But again, I think to Dave's point, the primary audience here is decision makers on campus who have or are looking at implementing large-scale solutions. And to the extent that students are part of their stakeholder group, then all the better. But it's not necessarily primarily intended for students as an audience.
Although I would say part of the idea of this was because of all the different stakeholders you run into and going through these exercises, whether it's students or CFOs, they all need that basic 101 entry point. And if you can get them to understand what you're talking about and the scale at which it operates, often, I guess I would say students are an intended audience in that case, because if you've got a bunch of students that have a lot of energy, but they're focused on something that actually doesn't scale, and you can redirect them to something that does scale, that would be a great outcome, and certainly was intended as we built this. Yeah. So anyway, but go ahead.
Yeah, good point. Well, Chris, I just wanted, I admittedly did not, I haven't watched the webinar from last week about the group in Pennsylvania, but there is that great story, and that I think that precludes that the process to kind of invite and share the opportunity to all the schools across the state. And then there was the Swarthmore student that was very involved in that process. And I think that story is wonderful. I don't know if that was shared last week, but I think that's a good example of what both of you are talking about.
I guess the other thing that I could see being added into this as it's currently constituted is, sharing the stories of students and how students have promoted a particular topic. That would be absolutely something we would want to include here and be a great resource. And I could see us expanding the concept of what's, how do we slice and dice the resources on a given topic as the topic gets more depth to it? Because right now, a lot of these are they're basically home pages for the idea, but as more information is gathered, more people collaborate on it, that's intended to grow, not just be, it's not like we publish it out and it's done. That's not the idea.
There's a comment on they'd love to see a solution and graphics for campus composting programs. So a little bit to that point, do you have a sense of what the rollout of new resources might look like on this platform?
Yeah, let's see. I'm trying to think. I think we have a early concept of that. If somebody's interested in helping us flesh out the content at this point, we have, I think, 40 some ideas that we thought were worth making a draft graphic for. There probably were another 15 or 20 that we had at least had on the list at some point. I know that particular topic is definitely in the mix. I have to go back and look and see what its status is. But the process of taking that from concept to an actual page on here isn't that difficult. We just need to find somebody that's interested in helping us flesh out the content. And that really includes, like I was talking about before. So it really talks about the coming up with a paragraph description of what it is, some basic benefits, challenges, helping us to review the graphic, especially working with the graphic designer that works with Second Nature so that it looks consistent, filling out the matrix for it, and then providing some resources. So it's the kind of thing that if you really know the topic well and think about it all day, every day, I would imagine you could probably do that in a sitting, or at least, a sitting with a couple of reviews and emails back and forth. So as far as how quickly will we implement new topics, I think that's based on somewhat the amount of feedback we get from this webinar. I think there's some limitation on graphic design and capabilities within Second Nature, since they're the ones paying for the hosting and the graphic design work and things like that. But I think our hope is that as quickly as possible is the answer to that question.
Yeah, I think so. You know, existing sponsors will get an opportunity to review this opportunity. We have, you know, a list of potential sponsors, and some have been shared the opportunity. And then again, as Dave mentioned, you know, this was launched and made public at the Climate Leadership Summit at the end of February. We've now, you know, kind of made some tweaks and updates, which were happening up until this morning. And so this chance to more widely share that this exists, and you know, we're going to get that out more to our network, that the opportunity is there. So throughout the remainder of 2020, we do hope to really start to build out content, but we'll see how the response is from today and moving forward. Yep.
There's no more questions, but I just wanted to remind folks that we have another webinar coming up on this Thursday, May 14th, about how solar projects can inform sustainability and curriculum goals. That's going to be with St. John's University and Abby and the renewable energy developer Geronimo. So they're going to discuss sort of some projects that have happened on that campus. And if you'd like more information, just shoot an email to info@secondnature.org. We'll send you info on that. And this webinar was recorded, so that'll be available in the future as well.
Great. And final comment from me, it would just be, you know, feel free to reach out, especially folks that I know. I mean, I know there's a lot of you that have been in various levels of discussions about some of these topics over time. So if you know one of us well, call us, you know, reach out. If you don't know any of us, call Steve, I guess, probably would be the first person to talk to. But yeah, we look forward to getting some input and great questions. And you know, this is a starting point. This is not done. This is a work in progress that we hope that you'll all take part in and benefit from.
Yeah, just want to say thank you to Chris and Dave for all the hard work to get it to this point. And you know, thanks for being partners here. And thanks to Devin for helping to facilitate today's presentation.
All right, we'll give everybody 13 minutes back.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, everyone.